Pretty amazing what you can do on there. But you just got back from Manchester, England, interviewing Conor McGregor in front of 5,000 people live and streaming on pay-per-view to do an interview. How did that come about?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. I am honored, and I believe, was your last guest Bob Costas? Is that true?
Yes, it was.
Wow, what a fall from grace for your show to go from Bob Costas to me. But that is amazing. I'm a huge fan of his, and he's actually one of the main reasons why I went to Syracuse. So it's pretty cool for me to be on after him. And again, thank you for having me. So that was, I was approached in early January about doing that. And to be honest, I was like, what? I mean, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. You want me to go there for a 1-hour interview and in front of 5,000 people, black tie event. Only Conor can draw a crowd like that. Only he can pull something like that off. And it was an unbelievable experience. I've never done anything like that. Very unique. But the people who organized it, a company called An Experience With, they've done this with the likes of Van Damme and Schwarzenegger, Pacino, to name a few recently. They really were a first class bunch, and they treated me really nicely. And the thing that I mentioned on the show was, what surprised me the most was that no one ever asked me like, hey, so what are you going to talk about in this interview? Where are you going to go with it? They just let me do what I wanted to do. And, I'm happy that they did that. That meant a lot to me. And it was, a nice little, I think a nice little nod to the work that I've done with Conor in the past. And, afterwards they were super happy as well. But it was just crazy to be in that setting. And then his music plays and Buffer speaking and all this stuff. And it felt like he was going to come out for a fight. Like people are standing on their chairs. Again, a black tie event, like dinner tables, all this stuff, and chanting him and chanting ole ole. And it felt like the energy in the room was like he was going to come out and fight. And then we had to kind of sit down and talk. But yeah, it was really, really cool. Something that I'll never forget for sure.
Now, I know the live audience was on fire, as all of anything Conor goes to. It seems like he takes over and his people travel from all over. But how was it received on the pay-per-view? Have you heard anything on the numbers?
I've not heard a lot on the numbers. I don't think it did incredibly. Look, I'll be honest with you straight up. I fought hard to not make it a pay-per-view. I told them, you put it on, a YouTube channel, you get a few sponsors, you can easily guarantee them 500,000 views right off the bat, if not more. And then the other thing was the UFC, who's in the pay-per-view business, they have a whole anti-piracy department. And they have people that are watching streams and things like that and are taking down videos after the fact. A small company like this, and I understood the thinking behind doing it. I mean, they're just an upstart company. They have a lot of costs. They're not owned by the UFC or even Vox, who owns MMAfighting.com, the website that I work for. They don't have an anti-piracy department. So now if you go on YouTube, I mean, you can see many, 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 many different versions of this interview, and there's really nothing that they can do to stop it. And also if you add up all those views, it's well over 1 million now. So I was told, I think it was in the 10,000 range, which, I mean, really, if you're charging people £3.99, which is around $5, USD, is really not bad. I mean, again, Conor he's the only one who could do that. But, as far as live watching it off of their own stream, it would have been way more, I think, had they not gone the pay-per-view route. And I think a lot of the fans were kind of put off by that word because they're used to pay-per-view being $60. Again, it's the price of a cup of coffee here in New York. So it really wasn't that big of a deal. And I think it was an entertaining, 65 or so minutes. But, people are used to getting something for free, and it's hard to get them to shift.
Well, so that's where I watched it. I have to be honest. I wasn't home at the time when they were streaming it, so I just looked on YouTube. I was pleasantly surprised that the whole interview was on YouTube, and it was pretty high quality. Who was filming? So the version I watched it looked like it was like an official feed. Did someone just pirate that and put it on YouTube?
I'm sure that, yeah. I mean, there's tons of different versions I've seen. It's kind of funny because, for me, I didn't make any money off the pay-per-view. So, I just wanted it to be seen by the most amount of people possible. And this was the first time that they were doing a live interview, where, with Schwarzenegger and Pacino, those were just for the crowd. They didn't broadcast it. And they're not as topical as Conor is right now. There's so much going on in his life, so it made a lot of sense. What happened was they sold the ticket so fast, and they're like, wow, there's such a big demand. Let's try to broadcast this as well. And so they were doing it because of, the great interest in his story right now. And some people I think, took it off straight. There are a few streams that, aren't that great, but it's funny because YouTube, I guess, can, they know what you're into. So like on my YouTube page, it's a bunch of, Paw Patrol and Peppa Pig videos because of my kids, and then a bunch of MMA. That's basically and maybe a little NBA. And there's like on the side related videos. It's like 10 straight of our interview. So for me, who just wanted it to be seen by as many people as possible, it actually feels like I see it in more places than if it was just one, video player that was done officially by them. So it's all good. I think they were very happy with it, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I met a guy who flew in from Australia just for this, flew in on Friday, went back on Sunday, paid the $1,800 ticket to meet Conor backstage afterwards. Met another guy from Philadelphia. So, I mean, it's just amazing to see how popular he is.
Did you have any nerves or anxiety going into that in front of that live audience that you knew would be pretty rowdy?
No, honestly, not at all. Because, God is my witness, I did no preparation for it whatsoever. I feel like if I can't interview Conor McGregor right now in early 2017 with everything going on in his life, then, I'm not doing my job. Like, well, what the heck am I doing all day? This is my life. I spend every waking hour thinking about mixed martial arts. If Dana White, Ronda Rousey, John Jones, Daniel Cormier walked into the room that I'm sitting in right now, if I couldn't do a 1-hour interview with them right now, then I'm not doing my job properly. So to me, it was amazing how I just blocked everything out. I mean, because I've never really, I've been in an arena before, like when I was working for Fox, we're at the desk, there's people behind us, and then there's just cameras in front of us. That to me is almost more intimidating than having all the people in front of us, because you kind of just get lost, like the people just all blend into one and you just block them out. And it ended up being just me and him talking, and some people were making fun of me about like how close I was sitting to him. It was really just because I was engaged, but also because I couldn't hear him that well. It was so loud, and I was worried that the people at home and the people in the crowd couldn't hear, but I got no complaints about that. Maybe just because we were so close to each other, it was harder to hear. But I'm actually generally a nervous person about everything else, but when it comes to my work, I don't get nervous all that much.
So do you prep for any interviews that you do? I mean, how long is your the MMA Hour, the podcast you do?
It's actually 4 hours long.
Yeah. So do you prep for any of those? I was just watching your Ryan Bader interview earlier today. Do you prep for anything like that?
No, I don't prep for those. One day I'll show people what's on my computer. The only thing that's on my computer during the show is I have GChat open so that I can talk to my producer in the back, and also Twitter. Just in case any breaking news, and also like to tweet that, Ryan Bader is up next on the show. Again, I know what's going on in Ryan's life. I know he's a free agent. I know he's playing the field. I know he's talking to Bellator. I know what he's thinking about. I know what's happened to him to get to this point. And so I don't feel like the way my brain works, I feel like I have these compartments. And so I have a little Ryan Bader file over here. I have, again, like a Cormier file, a Rumble Johnson file. Now on Monday's show, there was a guy named Francis Ngannou, who is an up-and-coming heavyweight star from France. That was the first time I interviewed him, and he has a very unique story. He lived on the streets. He was homeless just 3.5 years ago, moved from Cameroon to France, etc. So I will admit I read a couple of articles on him just to familiarize myself, because I didn't have that relationship with him. There was nothing I could build off of from our previous interview. But then I spoke to Rampage Jackson, who I've been interviewing for years now, and I knew everything that I didn't have to read anything about him. So again, if Jimmy Johnson of NASCAR fame walked into the room, and I'd probably feel a little less sure of myself. And, I don't have that compartment in my brain just because I don't follow his story and read about him every day. But when it comes to the MMA fighters, I feel like part of the job is to always be ready, because you never know who you're going to run into.
Yeah, I can imagine from doing a lot of the stuff, the work you had for Fox when you're interviewing fighters backstage. Yeah, I guess if you live that, it seems like you do. You live and die MMA. You know so much about these guys. I guess you have to understand how your own brain works. And I fall victim to that sometimes, to where I've talked to people on here, and I do some work on Sirius XM, and we'll have guests on every time on 4-hour show usually. And I have to start looking them up, but sometimes I over prep, and I know the answers, and I'll start asking them almost leading questions, and I apologize in advance. It's an issue I have, to where if I know too much about a guy, or I have a bunch of things I want to make sure I hit on, I will it's never as natural, I guess. I'm not as naturally curious. Sometimes it's best for me to not really know much at all about the guy.
Yeah, so this is a fascinating topic. I could talk about this all day because I love interviewing, and I think that there is an art to it. And one of the things that I feel like is disappointing isn't the right word, but because there's so much media out there, there's so many different outlets. There's TV, radio, there's social media, there's podcasts. There's so many places where people can interview, and you see a lot of athletes who go from being asked questions to now having to be a little more inquisitive and curious and being the ones who are asking the questions. You see that they sometimes don't listen to what the person that they're talking to is saying. They're not asking the proper follow-ups. They're usually like reading off of, a list of questions, and then that becomes a crutch, and you don't end up listening to what the person is saying. So yeah, I agree 100%. Sometimes it's better to, I don't like to write any questions because I don't want to follow a script. I want it to just flow like a normal conversation. And if you're maybe over preparing and writing down too much, and it will lead to you asking less inquisitive questions. But I've listened to a lot of your stuff, and I think that you listen. The main thing is to listen. It's not so much, asking good questions and almost getting in and out and not being too wordy, run-on sentences and things like that is very important. But the main thing is to listen, because when you're going outside, when you meet someone at a party, you're just kind of meeting them, and those are the best kind of conversations. And sometimes people they overthink the interview too much. So you see a lot of ex-athletes or people who are new to interviewing, and I'm still trying to figure it out myself, get thrown into the fire because they have this great outlet. And for me at least, someone who is just obsessed with interviewing, it's hard for me to listen to because I'm like, you should have asked that, you should have followed up with that. So yeah, it's definitely a fast